This day in sports history. It's October 10th, and on this day throughout sports history, we had a wild shootout in the Red River Rivalry. A literal shootout led to the death of one of baseball's pioneers, and a wild World Series first. All that plus a little more, including a non-sports fun fact about the first map drawn with America on it. Hang around. I guarantee this episode will be both fun and information intense. Well, as we get set for another edition of the Red River Showdown this Saturday, let's go back to what happened in this storied rivalry on this day in 2020. This was one of the wildest games in this series, if not in the history of college football. Both teams were still stinging from close losses the week before. Texas lost by 2 to TCU, and Oklahoma gave up 2 late touchdowns to Iowa State to lose by 7 the week prior. So both the Longhorns and the Sooners were ready to get back in the win column. Of course, neither team really needs additional motivation for this game. The rivalry started 125 years ago, and since 1929, the two teams have played each other every year. Since 1932, the game has been played in Dallas at the Cotton Bowl. Well, the 2020 edition had a little bit of everything, but one thing it had in abundance was scoring. By the end of the third quarter, Oklahoma had a 31-17 lead, and it stayed that way as the clock wound down under 4 minutes to play. Sam Ehlinger hit Joshua Moore for a 9-yard touchdown to cut the lead to 7. The Longhorns nearly came up with the recovery on the onside kick that followed, but they couldn't corral it. Texas was out of timeouts at this point, so the Sooners really just needed one first down to put this edition in the history books. And if they had, we wouldn't be talking about this being one of the classics. But the Sooners only managed to gain a yard and run a little over a minute off the clock. Texas got the ball back with a minute 42 left, and Ehlinger was able to use his feet to pick up first down after first down and get out of bounds to stop the clock as well. A pass interference call on Oklahoma put the ball on the 2-yard line with 18 seconds left. Here's Gus Johnson with what happened next.
More emotion. Ehlinger jump pass. Touchdown, Texas. Whoa! Sam Ehlinger. Unbelievable.
That was Ehlinger's second TD pass of the game, and more importantly, after the PAT, the game was tied at 34 and heading to overtime. So this was the previous gen of OT rules. Ball at the 25, you kick after a touchdown in the first 3 overtime periods, and then you're forced to go for 2 in the fourth and beyond. Each team scored 7 in the first OT, Oklahoma scored first in the second OT, and so Texas had to respond. Sam Ehlinger put it in gear and got to the end zone.
Ehlinger in trouble. Ehlinger gets downfield. Ehlinger still running. Ehlinger on his feet. Holy Toledo! Big Sam! Whoa!
That was Ehlinger's 4th rushing touchdown of the day, meaning he was responsible for every Longhorn TD on the afternoon. That tied it up again, and it went to a 3rd overtime. Texas had their field goal try blocked, giving Oklahoma a chance to win it with a kick of their own, but their try went wide, setting up OT number 4. The Sooners got the ball first, and freshman QB Spencer Rattler went to work.
Rattler again to throw it. Steps up in the pocket, throws on the right. Jake Stokes! Touchdown OU!
That was Rattler's 3rd touchdown pass of the day. The Sooners got the mandatory 2-point conversion, and it was 53-45. At that point, Texas and Sam Ehlinger ran out of magic.
Ehlinger lines up. Picked up, and that's your ball game. Trey Brown. And that'll be the story of this game for Oklahoma. The Oklahoma defense forcing turnovers like never before. 53-45. OU wins it in a thriller.
Thank you, Gus Johnson. It was indeed a thriller. It was the highest scoring game in the Red River Rivalry at the time, but that record was short-lived. The Sooners and Longhorns would combine for 103 points the following year to top it. On this day in 1871, Octavius Catto was murdered in Philadelphia. Now, Now, Catto was a black man who started one of the earliest professional Negro League baseball teams, and he helped make Philadelphia central as a baseball town. In 1865, Catto established the Philadelphia Pythians, made up of black professionals from the surrounding areas, pulling in players from New York and Northern Virginia as well. Now, baseball was seen as a way to assimilate into society. Prior to the Civil War, opportunities to play professionally were denied to black players, but following the end of the war and Reconstruction, it was a newly opened path. The Pythians played a limited number of games against other black teams and a few white teams, though most of those encounters with white teams were said to be played begrudgingly. But the team did not last very long. Just 2 years after starting, the Pennsylvania State Convention of Baseball denied the Pythians based on race, saying that a team could not have more than 2 black players on its roster. They were not allowed to schedule games, and the team folded. Catto turned his sights to politics, and unfortunately, that's what led to his demise. He led one of the earliest civil rights movements in the country, and even though black men were allowed to vote in Pennsylvania at this point, they were harassed when trying to do so. Irish immigrants had flooded into the area and competed with black men for jobs. They were also on the opposite ends of the spectrum voting-wise. Violence broke out in the city with police officers called in to quell the fighting on this day, but since most of the police were Irish immigrants themselves, well, they only exacerbated the problem. October 10, 1871 was a day for voting in Philadelphia, and as Octavius walked to the polls to vote, he was met in the streets by Irishman Frank Kelly. The two began arguing, with Kelly not allowing Catto to pass. Kelly pulled his pistol, and he shot Catto 3 times. Catto was not able to pull his gun quick enough, and he died of his wounds. Kelly was never charged for the murder. Octavius Catto, one of baseball's earliest black pioneers, died at the age of 32. This episode is brought to you by the Stirling Soap Company. I'm a big fan of shave soap. I've been using different brands for years, and I recently gave Stirling's shave soaps a try, and I've been very happy with the results. Stirling's shave soaps give you a great lather and a frictionless feel that allows the razor to glide right over the skin for a super close shave. No skin irritation and a clean, refreshing feel with no soapy residue after. I can tell you without a doubt, it's simply the best shave I've ever had. And my wife has noticed too. And here's the thing. With the ability to purchase 1-ounce sample pucks, you can try out different scents to find the right one for you. Give Stirling Soap a try today. Visit stirlingsoap.com. That's STIRLING soap.com. On this day in 1920, the Cleveland Indians did a couple of things that had never been done before in the World Series. The modern version of the World Series had been around since 1903. It skipped a year in 2004 before becoming a postseason staple in 1905. So here we are in 1920, and there has been a little bit of history to the Fall Classic. In the 1920 edition, it was the Cleveland Indians against the Brooklyn Robins. Now, the Robins would become the Dodgers in 1932. Cleveland had some heavy hitters, and they ended up outscoring Brooklyn 21-8 in the series, but there were only 2 homers hit the entire series, and both of those were hit by Cleveland. Probably the biggest reason for that is both of these teams played in cavernous ballparks. Brooklyn's Ebbets Field was 477 to center. Cleveland's League Park was 460 feet to center. By comparison, the deepest center field in the majors now is in Houston at 435 feet, and that's 15 feet further than the next closest one. Now, figure into the mix a fairly inconsistent ball that got knocked out of shape, and you can understand why no more than 2 home runs were hit. But one of the firsts in this series was a home run. This was Game 5, and the series was tied 2 games apiece. In the bottom of the first, Elmer Smith stepped to the plate with the bases loaded, and he unloaded on a Burley Grimes spitter for the first grand slam in World Series history. Jim Bagby was the Indians' pitcher on this day, and he stepped up to take some swings in the 4th inning with his team still protecting a 4-0 lead and 2 men on. Bagby unleashed his fury on another Grimes pitch for a 3-run homer, becoming the first pitcher to ever homer in a game. And in case you were wondering, yes, Babe Ruth had played in 2 World Series at this point with the Boston Red Sox, and he had not hit one out yet. So that's 2 firsts from the same game. But the thing that is most remembered from this one is what happened in the 5th inning. The Robins had men on first and second with no outs. They were trailing 7-0 at this point, and maybe they were set to have a big inning. Clarence Mitchell came to the plate with big ideas, and he smashed a liner that appeared to be headed into the gap in right center. But Cleveland second baseman Bill Wamsgans snagged it, stepped on second to double up the runner who had broken for third, and he turned to tag out the stunned runner coming from first for not only the first triple play in World Series history, but the first unassisted triple play in World Series history. The Indians went on to win the game 8-1 and then clinched the series 2 days later. I've talked a few times already about the year that Bob Gibson had back in 1968. The 1.12 ERA during the regular season, the MVP, and the Cy Young Award, the record 17 strikeouts in Game 1 of the 68 World Series. Well, on this day, it was Game 7 of the 68 series, and Gibson was back on the mound. He'd already won twice in this series, and if you are a Cardinals fan, well, this is the man you wanted on the bump. He squared off with Detroit's Mickey Lolich in this one, and this game was a beaut for the first 6 innings. That is, if you like pitchers' duels. It was a scoreless tie heading to the 7th, and in fact, Gibson had sent the first 2 Tiger batters in the top half to the bench. But with 2 outs, the Tigers were able to get a couple of hits, and that brought heavy-hitting Jim Northrup to the plate. Now listen, I'm a guy who did not play baseball past high school, so who am I to criticize a big leaguer, especially a good defensive outfielder like Curt Flood? Flood was a 7-time Gold Glove winner for his play in the outfield, but the one thing I remember as a kid is that when a ball is hit, your first step should be back because it's easier to run in than to backtrack. And that's exactly what Flood did not do. When Northrup sent a deep fly to center, Flood's first few steps were in, and then when he realized his mistake, he turned to run back, but it was too late for him to recover. The ball hit the wall and 2 runs scored. Now, if Flood breaks initially and heads to the fence, he gets to it. Inning over, game still scoreless. Instead, when Detroit added another single to score Northrup, it was 3-0 Detroit. The Tigers picked up another one in the 9th and won the game 4-1, wrapping up the 1968 World Series for the Detroit Tigers. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. If you have ever wondered why America was named after Amerigo Vespucci and not Christopher Columbus, well, it's because the cartographers who designed the first maps showing this new place that Columbus had supposedly found first, well, they had never heard of that guy. The map makers were under the impression that Vespucci was the first to discover it. That's all I've got for you today. Come on back tomorrow for another edition of This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.